Reauthorization. So we know that you are the folks that are following this, that are active, and we wanted to give you the latest breaking news out of D.C. on what's going on the Hill in terms of reauthorization. So again, welcome. This is, everyone on the call, everyone from teachers to support staff to community members to faith leaders to parents. And so we are so grateful to have you in this fight with us. It's a historic moment. It's the 50th anniversary of ESEA. Originally, the purpose was to make sure that we mitigated the effects of poverty and we closed the achievement gap. And so we know, as you know, that this is no small order and that it really is what we need to do. So I want to take just a minute, turn this over to Jane Maroney, who's one of our folks that has been negotiating and working on the Hill for ESEA. Jane?
Hi, I just want to thank Jennifer for organizing it, and thank you again for being here and just go over sort of where we are in the Hill right now. Both the House and the Senate are in the process of moving legislation, and Randi will give you more details on our involvement and where things are. This is a time that both bodies are moving bills at the same time. So there's great interest in what's going on. So the timing of this call is just, we expect the bill to be back on the House floor, if not as soon as next week, right after the April recess, and the Senate is moving its legislation as well, so you've probably been reading about it. We're going to be focusing primarily on this call on 3 or 4 basic issues. One is maintaining the original primary focus of ESEA, which is equity, keeping the primary focus on leveling the playing fields for disadvantaged students, making sure that the resources go to where they need to go. The second piece of it is reducing the testing and reducing the stakes that are attached to the testing, both for students, teachers, and schools, and moving from the current system, which is sort of test and punish, to one that is more support and help schools turn around and do what they need to do. And finally, we really want to talk about what you can do to help move this forward in a more positive way. So in a few minutes, we're going to turn this over to Randi, and just want to give you a preview of some of the things you can do to help, which is what you've already done before, because that's why you're on this call. It's going to be writing letters, contacting a member of Congress, emails, all of that stuff makes a big difference. People in offices keep track of what they hear from you, and calling often and frequently makes a big difference. So with that said, we're going to turn it back to Jennifer.
Actually, Jane, I just have a quick question. And, we're in the middle of ESEA reauthorization. It's the first time we've been able to get here in more than a decade. We had the Hill moving on legislation pretty quickly, and then it seemed to slow down. We haven't seen what the Senate is doing yet. Can you talk a little bit about there are the specific pieces of the legislation that I think a lot of us care about. We want to make sure that we have, sort of restore a balance and we use testing appropriately. We want to make sure that we have a robust accountability system. We want to make sure that paraprofessional and support standards still exist. All those pieces, what do you think is the holdup? And whether or not everybody agrees on the specific pieces, should at this point, do we need to just push to call the question that we need to bring ESEA up and have something to move forward?
Well, and it's a good question, and like with everything in Washington, if you paid any attention, ESEA has become the victim of other politics and partisan politics. And I know Randi will touch on this, but the closer you get to an election and a presidential election, the less likely something will happen and move ahead. So the bill that was on the House floor, there's great interest in moving a bipartisan bill, certainly by the senators. Senators Murray and Alexander are working very hard on negotiating a bipartisan agreement. There was definitely bipartisan votes in the House of Representatives. There was an effort. The bill is not perfect. there's partisan politics involved, but there is, we believe, a good faith effort to move something. Whether that will work in the end, we really don't know, because it gets held hostage to other issues. But at some point, you just have to keep the process moving forward. You can always say no if it turns into something that you don't like or we don't like. But it is very important we believe, to get out from under what has been untenable situation with No Child Left Behind and the waivers and Race to the Top. So we believe that whatever changes may come out of this process are certainly worth taking a look at in a final piece of legislation. It doesn't mean anything has to be endorsed, but the only way to see if it's going to be better is to allow the process to move forward one way or the other. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Randi, and thank you.
So, good evening, everybody. We have about 4,000 people on the phone right now. So I want to just actually talk for a quick amount of time and then open it up to questions. So you've heard from J-Rod and you heard from Jane. The process is very, 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 very liquid right now, but it's, there is this opportunity to actually change what's happening right now. We know that, as this is like the month of Park and Smarter Balance and all the horrors that are going on right now, in terms of people, both schools not being prepared, teachers not being prepared, the technology not working in a lot of places, and the tests having consequential effects, that people are just pretty much fed up. So these are the things we're trying to get done. Number one, there's about $20 billion in terms of Title I ESEA funds that go to schools across the country. They don't go to districts. They don't go for data. They go to schools to actually help kids succeed. It was started by Lyndon Johnson as part of the war on poverty. There's been a lot of focus on Johnson and on the Voting Rights Act. But in the same year that they did the Voting Rights Act, he did the war on poverty. He was a teacher in Texas. He saw what poverty did firsthand to kids. And what Title I, or what the original ESA was about, was to actually really try to help kids in districts and in neighborhoods of concentrated poverty where states may not have been helping them, or communities or cities or districts may not have had the money. So it was really an attempt to focus on kids who were in poverty and to have direct services like teachers to lower class size, paraprofessionals to be an extra set of hands, music and art, getting supplies and materials directly for those kids. So the first piece that we're trying to do is go back to, sorry to use this phrase, original intent, but go back to a place where we're really serving the kids that need it most, particularly right now when half the kids in public schools are poor. So that's something that you see Democrats across the board, in the House, in the Senate, President, all focused on. So you'll hear words like, we can't have portability. We have to have maintenance of effort, because it's a matter of making sure that states can't use these funds for other purposes or to actually deal with, districts that, because there's been austerity all over the place, want to use this to defray other costs. So number one is equity, and we have said that the purposes of ESEA must be sacrosanct. That's number one. Number two are all the things that you've seen, which is that after No Child Left Behind in 2000 and Race to the Top and, the waivers that Arne Duncan and, sadly, President Obama have done, what we've seen is high-stakes testing on steroids. And so what we've said is we need to actually curb that and have an accountability system That's not based in No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top. Right now, the accountability system from No Child Left Behind basically said annual testing 3 through 8 and once in high school would be used to determine whether children have made annual yearly progress. And if they haven't made annual yearly progress, and if 100% of children are proficient by 2014, yes, I know it's 2015, then schools would be closed and districts would be sanctioned. And then Race to the Top said, and not only will schools be closed and districts will be sanctioned, but we're going to use these testing results for teacher evaluation. And then you saw the huge skyrocketing of tests basically to evaluate teachers. So our priority number 2 and our priority number 3 is simply, it was just wrong for the federal government to get involved in teacher evaluation. Yes, we know we need to have teacher evaluation, and it needs to be fair. But federalizing it didn't work. And so we're saying that the federal government should not be the human resource department of every school district and should be out of the business of teacher evaluation. And frankly, on this issue, the Republicans agree with us. Lamar Alexander put a bill in that basically prohibited Arne Duncan from getting his hands on teacher evaluation. And the last issue, and probably as important as the equity issue, is that we need a different accountability system. There can't be an accountability system that's based upon annual tests 3 through 8, once in high school, that determine, annual English and math tests 3 through 8, once in high school, that determine everybody's lives for everything. We know that kids need to be critical thinkers and problem solvers, and they need to learn how to work in teams, and they need to have resilience, and we need to have the resources from states, from others, and we need to do a whole bunch of other things. So why are we having an accountability system that was built in 2000? I keep on saying, why do you have the 2000 Chevy when you have the 2015 Jeep? You need a different engine for the 2015 Jeep than you had in the 2000 Chevy. And we need a different accountability system, one that delinks and curbs this high-stakes fixation. So those are the 3 basic things. Within that, we've tried to make sure that there's a bunch of other things that get done, including making sure that paraprofessionals still have the credentialing that they have right now, so that, frankly, not anybody can just walk in and displace a paraprofessional right now because somebody has a cousin or a friend that they want to hire. And there's a bunch of other things. But those are the 3 main goals that we have been focused on. I know there's probably questions about annual testing. I'll talk about that too. But let me just stop now and see if there are any questions. And because I really appreciate how so many people are on the phone. We had a great lobby week this week. We saw lots of different legislators, people throughout our union. 18,000 comments were submitted from members of our union to the House and the Senate in terms of the bills. And so we're in there every single day trying to see what we can do. Last thing I'll say is this. Lots of people are saying, oh, so we don't need a bill. Look, if we can get things to be better than they are right now, where there's not a constant fixation on testing ruling the world and ruling every single aspect of teachers' lives and kids' lives, which is what's happening right now with waivers and Race to the Top, and we can get something done that's better than that in a bipartisan Congress, that's what we're trying to do.
So, Randi, thanks so much for that. If you have a question or a comment, we would like to ask you to press 0, and you will be connected with an operator and plugged into the conversation. And so, again, press 0 if you have a question or a comment. Going back to some of what's been going on in ESEA reauthorization, Randi, as well as you as activists, we just had more than 40 Senate visits yesterday between our members and members of the Senate. Randi, you've had several high-ranking conversations with folks on the Hill. What's your take on the appetite for people to really take on ESEA and do the right thing?
So we've actually had, and I don't normally talk about this, but we actually had an hour-and-a-half conversation one-on-one with the president. I frankly, and I don't normally talk about this very much. I'm not really talking to Arnie Duncan. I mean, we do our normal, pro forma meetings, but I don't find that effective. We've been talking directly to the White House. We've been talking directly to the House leadership, both sides, Senate leadership, both sides, in terms of trying to see if we can get something better than right now, plus keeping the integrity of the equity issues. There's a big appetite for doing something. At the same time, what you're seeing is a lot of the civil rights community basically wanting to keep the accountability system that there is right now, and particularly keeping the annual testing, because they are deathly afraid that in a place like Mississippi or Alabama or Georgia, or places that have had lots and lots of cuts and have never had the kind of commitment that they need to have to kids with challenges, or kids that are poor, or kids who are black or brown, they feel like that they need to actually make sure that there are those kind of accountability measures. What we've said is that we need to actually make sure that even though data should inform instruction, that the status quo doesn't work. And we have to actually have a new accountability system. At the same time, what we've also said is that if we have annual data through annual testing or other things, if a parent doesn't want it, they should have the right to opt out, and that should be in federal law. So we've actually said if data is really to inform instruction, then a parent should be able to have it both ways, either to have it to inform instruction or be able to opt out of standardized tests. So big appetite on the Hill to change things. Surprising the bipartisan push to do that. But this is a law where the devil really is in the details. And, you saw from the House side, even though that they could not get the House Republicans, even with their bill that basically said there should be that there was an opening for vouchers and there was an opening to dilute the equity, that they could not get enough Republicans to support the bill to put the bill on the floor. So there's, so as I said, the politics are odd. Every day it changes, but these are our priorities.
Thanks, Randi. And so we've asked folks if they wanted to make a comment or question to press 0. We still encourage you to do that. We do have a call from June Robinson from New York. June, are you on?
Yes.
Hi, June. Welcome to the call. We're here actually at Randi's table chatting about this. What's your question?
Well, I had a comment that I agree that there's too much testing. It takes too much time out of the students. And my question, I had another question, is what are we doing for the children that have the children that are smart, but they poor. They also poor kids, and they smart. What are we doing for them? We're doing a lot of stuff for the students that need help, but what are we doing for those that don't need help? What are we doing for them?
Well, you are totally right that what's happened is that when you have this fixation on testing in so many districts, they do what, and I'm going to get the wrong lexicon, but they basically fixate on the kids who just are either right below the grade, and they fixate on the kids who they need to get from below to proficient, as opposed to looking at all kids and trying to figure out how to actually help all kids reach their God-given potential. And part of what we're trying to do is have an accountability system that's about improvement and about reaching the whole child, as opposed to one that sanctions a school, closes a school, fires teachers and paraprofessionals and principals, or sanctions kids if they don't pass by a certain cut score. So that's part of what we're trying to do in terms of a nationwide accountability system, if we can get there, so that you can focus on the whole child, and you can focus on where kids are right now and how to help them reach their God-given potential, instead of focusing only on what you need to do to make sure the school doesn't close.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question from Marla out of Maryland. Marla, are you there?
Yes.
Hi, Marla. Welcome to the call. You're talking with Randi.
Hi, how you doing? I want to know, how can we go about having our individual voices heard, either with Arnie Duncan or before the committee?
So that's a really good question. And so what we're trying to do is, and, look, and maybe I shouldn't say this on this call, but I frankly have given up on Arnie Duncan. Yeah.
I asked him because he supported me through my dissertation, and I'm a child of poverty and a single mother. And he gave me my interview by allowing his assistant secretary at the time to be my interviewee for my dissertation. And I think there may be some type of connection there to actually begin some positive dialogue.
Well, what I would do is, why don't you email me tomorrow, and we will make sure that we set up that kind of meeting that you can have with him directly, and so maybe you can get through in a way that many of us can't. But this is where I think there's a real opportunity. Barbara Mikulski, one of your senators, is listening to us over and over again. Loretta Johnson, who everybody knows, has been there. We've had lobbyists there. That's why those 18,000 emails in terms of going to the committee has been so huge. Your voices are really important. So I think where the voices matter most is when we can collect voices or get you into seeing your congressional representative or your senator directly. But God bless you. If you think you can get and talk to Duncan and you can change his mind, that would be fantastic. And if you want to do that, we will make sure we can make an arrangement for you.
Thank you, Marla. And now we have a question from, one thing that I do want to bring up, or actually two things. One is, unlike a lot of the sausage making that takes place in Washington, one of the things that those that are deeply embedded in what goes on at the Congress, they have said this is one of those rare moments and one of those issues that if you put the pressure on, if you from their home base, tell legislators, senators, and House members alike that this is a priority for you, what your values are, and you're on this call with us because you share the same passion that we do, that if you put that pressure on at home, that Congress members are going to listen. They're going to feel that pressure. This is a bipartisan opportunity. So that's one thing that I just wanted to footnote. And the second thing is, at the end of this call, we're going to give everyone who's still on the call an opportunity to patch through to their Senate office and let the Senate know that we want you to take this up. And in your own words, you can tell your senator what your priorities are, that this is important to you, and that you want to see something happen. Now I'd like to pause and take a question from Natasha out of Maryland. Natasha, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. How are you?
Hi, Natasha. Welcome.
Hi, Randy. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I think you've already answered it, really. But I'm just very much concerned how we're going to hear impact participants. Is it going to be a task force by region? Is AFT going to canvass the whole country from different memberships and locals and get a task force representation from each local so that we can actually sit down and begin the work, which is going to be long and hard? or are we going to do this like online or in webinars, or how can we do this to really participate? Because a lot of these Title I schools, Randy, they are not using the money for Title I schools. And
so if part of what we've done is we've done a bunch of polling of our members. We've done a bunch of focus grouping to get a sense, of really from people around the country, because, different parts of the country have different opinions, to get a sense of where our members really are. We've talked to our leadership. Every week I'm somewhere else, and I talk to members all the time. As you know, on Twitter and on Facebook, I'm addicted to Twitter, and, I do have 3 email addresses, by the way, and I do actually use all of them. But we have tried to actually canvas in lots of different ways, and that's part of the reason why we got, at this point, almost 23,000 activists have done something about this. We had over 40, visits with legislators this week. We had a lot of action in home districts last week. So, but you never can do enough. Now, this is the dilemma. They're moving. Elections have consequences. We thought, frankly, after the last ESEA Reauthorization failed about 18 months ago, that wasn't going to be brought up until the next, until 2016. But Lamar Alexander, after the R's won the Senate, basically said this was first priority. So basically, from December, the moment he said that, we went into overdrive, including during the Christmas, holiday vacation, to really get a canvas of what our leaders were saying, what our members were saying. And so that's why, if there are things that we've missed, email us, write us, respond to the e-activists. And I am sure you're right that there's a lot of cronyism and corruption and patronage going on. And that's something that we have to deal with in terms of any implementation. Even under this administration, if they're not using Title I the right way, we should call it out. But that's part of the reason why I want to be so transparent about these are our 3 major goals. To see, are we the right track, are we the wrong track? But, what we think we've gotten a good sense of where the members are on this, but if we're wrong, tell us.
So, Natasha, thanks for that question. We have one more question on deck from Karen. Before we get to that, I'd like to pose a question to everyone who's with us. And so Randy has talked quite a lot about how there are lots of opportunities for people to speak up, whether it's in district, if it's in D.C., if it's through e-activism, that kind of thing. We need, at the end of the day, we need voices in our community to advocate on public education issues with us. We call them the AFT team. You can call them your neighbor. But they really are our strongest network of activists. If you are interested in being a part of that team, can you please press 2 and say, yes, I want to be part of the team that is kept up to date, that can speak in your community about these kinds of issues, whether it is at the federal level or, in some cases, it's the state and local level. So press 2 if you are interested in being an AFT team member, a rapid responder. If you want to fight for public education, press 2. So now I'd like to go to Karen from California. Karen, you've got a question.
Yes. Hi. Thank you for taking my call. I was wondering about the language that was that might be omitted in some of the versions of the bill that are going around, and I had heard that there was a push to remove arts from the language in the bill, and I wanted to find out what's happening with that. And I'm an arts educator, so that's kind of what drew me into this as well. And I believe that was coming out of the California Alliance for the Arts was pushing us to get involved in this action. So is there anything on that?
Yes.
So I think this is, so we are very much, so let me just, so thank you for being on this call, and I'm glad the arts educators in California are doing that push. The R's in their bill in the House wanted to block grant all of what's in Title I right now. So basically, then a state could decide where it went to and what it was used for. And that's why many of us are very concerned about that kind of block granting. Because right now, as Title I is, it goes for the arts. It goes for extra help. It goes for paraprofessionals. It goes for things that kids don't right now have from state governments in terms of kids in concentrated areas of poverty. And so we are foursquare into keeping it the way it is in terms of the equity stuff and keeping the arts there. And I normally talk about that in that kind of way. I'm sorry that I did today. But so if you are focused on keeping the equity pieces the way it is right now, that means the arts are covered. Are they covered enough? No. Do we need more art in school? Yes. And that's part of the other piece, which is let's stop with the test fixation and narrowing the curriculum so that things like music and art, which are such pieces of engagement, such highways of engagement for kids, that we can have more fulsomeness there. Okay. Thank you. You're welcome.
So we have had close to, we've actually had hundreds of you that raised your hand to ask a question. We're coming to the end of our conversation and want to make sure that we connect with all of you. So if you would like to ask your question still, you can email it to us at online@aft.org. That's online@applefranktom.org. We'll get back to you as soon as we can, and certainly encourage your friends. So now that we've talked about what's at stake, we want to tell you the next piece of this, and that is, again, reminder and kudos. You're on this call because you were fighting for kids and you're fighting for public education. So we've talked about what's at stake. We've talked about where we are in ESEA reauthorization right now. Randi's been brutally honest about where we are, and so what we'd like to do now is connect you to your senator's office, because the next wave of this conversation is going to take place in the Senate. We want to make sure that that your senator hears that this is important and what your values are. So we'd like to connect you to your senator's office. You can tell him or her in your own words that we need all the things Randi talked about, some things like robust multiple measure accountability, depressurized testing, a bill that restores ESEA's original intent. We want to get back to closing the achievement gaps and ultimately mitigating the devastating effects of poverty on our nation. So as we end this call, if you would like to be connected to your target senator, press 5. I'm pleased to note there are many of you on this call or your senator's office. Oh, I want to note for you that there may be some Senate offices that are closed or actually in the middle of meetings because we are fully engaged in Hill activity. So if they've closed early, you might get their voicemail. Not a big deal. Leave a message. Guarantee you that those Senate offices are keeping track of everybody who's called. So a reminder, if you'd like to speak to your Senate office, please press 5.
Thank you for calling Senator Bill Nelson's office in Washington, D.C. At this time, our office is closed. Bill values your opinion. Please leave your name and zip code, and we can record your comment. If you would like a detailed response from Senator Nelson, please visit our website at www.billnelson.senate.gov and complete the contact form. Thank you for calling Senator Nelson, and on behalf of all of us here, have a great day.